How do you see the issue?
Bill, these are parasites that peddle their poison on society, and they're responsible for some of the worst ills, including violent crime, unwanted pregnancy, as well as sexually transmitted diseases. So to say that it's the responsibility of the addict to make the decision is absurd, because people don't understand that in the disease of addiction, you lose the element of choice and rational decision-making. So these are people that prey on society, and they need to be treated like violent criminals. There are just some individuals who are deranged and who have sick delusional fantasies, and they live in their own world. And there's really there's nothing that we can do really as a society from a policy standpoint to prevent that from happening. For example, I hear a lot of people talking about gun control, and it's obviously a very polarizing issue. But I don't think that gun control laws changing are the answer. You can't take a complex psychosocial phenomenon like this and break it down and say it's one thing. Think about how many thousands of people there are on Facebook who have rants that are similar to this, and those people will never be violent. You can't just say it's guns. You can't say it's mental illness. We can't confuse prediction with prevention. We can create an environment that will reduce the risk, but we can never eliminate these events when you're dealing with a lone wolf scenario. If one deranged, determined individual wants to hurt people, they're going to do it, and there's very little we can do to stop that. It's a balance between individual rights and public safety, and the bottom line is that if you look at the statistics and you use the FBI's definition of a mass shooting, which is 4 or more individuals killed, not including the perpetrator, in the same general area, there really has not been an increase in mass shootings over the last 40 years. So we really need to be careful about who we pin the blame on, because it's very difficult to prevent a random event. And while certainly we need to improve the mental health system, I don't know that there's much more we could have done in this situation. A lot of people want to break down this complex situation into a simple problem and say it's guns or say it's mental illness. But this was the perfect storm of events that came together to create this tragedy. As we know, most people who are mentally ill are not violent, and most people who have firearms are not violent people. But substance abuse is a much bigger risk factor for violence than mental illness is. I've actually seen this myself professionally working in correctional settings. It starts off with something simple like giving an inmate personal food, and what happens is you keep moving a line that you're not supposed to cross, and pretty soon the line disappears.
When she was told, I need this bit, you know that's not because they're going to be baking with it.
Right, and certainly a bit takes it to a much different level than a brownie. But she was so starved for attention, and her self-esteem was so low, and she felt so lonely that she didn't want to give that up. And she was getting affection from them. She was getting reinforcement. And they used that. They preyed upon it. They found the one weak spot in her, and they kept pushing to get what they wanted. To be in a situation like this, your mind really does have to go to a place where it can essentially defend itself to it's just really a self-preservation instinct, essentially.
How should society react to these girls as they re-enter?
I think it's important to avoid the impulse to try to seek them out and want to speak with them. I think they need time to be with their families and people that love them and people that they can develop a sense of trust with. These events affect people differently. The minority community, their faith has been shattered, they're disillusioned, and they are essentially traumatized. It's what we call in the psychological literature learned helplessness. And so if they want a little bit of extra time for their exams, I think they should get it. And I think it's intellectually dishonest to say that they should be compared to another group of people that have been traumatized.
All right, so do you
deal
think,
with trauma in different ways.
But in your opinion, is it getting worse?
I do think it's getting worse. I also think we're looking at it more because of technology and social media. I do think that kids overall behave differently now than they did a generation ago because of several factors. I think teachers are somewhat under siege in this country. Smaller budgets, larger classroom sizes, and not feeling supported by administration. And I think the key to improving behavior in the classroom starts at home, and it's the example that the parents set for these kids in terms of respecting authority and respecting teachers, which unfortunately in today's society are an undervalued asset. There was a study that was done at Arizona State University in 2014 looking at this. We know that with suicides, for example, in kids, there's a contagion effect where when one child commits suicide, it encourages others to do that as well. Well, we know also with these types of killings that when someone commits a mass murder, there's also a contagion effect or copycat phenomenon. So when we celebrate it, when we publicize it, in some way we promote it, and that 20 to 30% of these killings can be attributed to ones that have done it before that are copying them.
copping
when these
out.
kids go to college,
Dr.
their
Boeski-
parents are
Dr.
still going to
Boeski,
rescue them,
You're
still
copping out.
indulge
Go
them.
ahead, Dr.
But the school is spending as much time with them, if not more, than their parents are. The school has to take some responsibility in this too. You know, we're teaching our kids that their parents are going to do their homework for them, and they have to learn to stand and fall on their own 2 feet. What happened was in 1996, the drug OxyContin hit the market, and it spurred to record use. By 2001, it was one of the best-selling drugs in America. And there were overdose deaths at epidemic proportions, and there still continue to be. But as law enforcement intervened and there was greater regulation, people started shifting from pharmaceutical-grade OxyContin to the cheaper alternative, heroin, because the supply of the pills dried up. And so we're seeing this disturbing trend of heroin overdoses. What we know about marijuana in the teen brain is that 1 in every 6 teens will become addicted to marijuana, and that long-term marijuana use affects problem-solving, memory, and IQ. And in one study that was done in Colorado, what we found was that 75% of youth in a treatment center were getting their marijuana from adults with legal marijuana registration cards. So it's become more accessible, it's become more socially acceptable, and I think it's a big problem. Well, I think the public has been a little bit hard on the family. You know, with sex offenders, it's really not black and white, it's shades of gray. And when this abuse occurred, Josh was really in a transitional period of his development, still curious, still learning about boundaries. And so I think while the parents may have delayed treatment somewhat and maybe not gone about it the right way, I think their heart was in the right place, and I think people have been very, very judgmental in bashing this family. This epidemic really started in 1996 when this drug was released. The sales were around $45 million, and then within a few years it was over $1 billion. This drug was part of a public health crisis, a national epidemic. So I am very concerned about this medication and the way it's used, but I think physicians are really the last line of defense to make sure that the medication is used properly, because it's really only meant for very severe pain. It's not meant for general use. And so I think that the fact that the FDA approved it is somewhat of a moot point, because it's incumbent upon physicians to prescribe it properly, because physicians prescribe medications what we call off-label all the time.